Hello class. The title of today's lesson is Adding and Subtracting Decimals. Today we are going to focus on accurately and precisely adding and subtracting decimals. So let's think back to 4th and 5th grade. One of our big things that we had to learn back then was how you add decimals. So here's the problem that we're working on here. It looks like 5.3 plus 4.81 equals, and it says question mark. Before we can solve that problem, there's a few things that we need to know and look at. The very first thing I want to look at is the vocabulary word or vocabulary term of decimal point. All right, so what is a decimal point? It's the symbol that separates the whole number from its remaining part. So I'm going to zoom in. Here is the decimal point. In front is the whole number. And behind, after the decimal point, to the right, is its remaining part. Sometimes it's called the fractional part, but I like just calling it the part. The point of the decimal point, the purpose of the decimal point, is to separate the whole from the part, or the wholes from the part. The next thing I want to look at is trailing zeros. So what are trailing zeros? You definitely use these in 4th and 5th grade. I'm not sure if your teacher called them trailing zeros, but they're zeros at the end of a decimal number, that do not change the value of the number. So let's jump into this and see what you remember. So here's that very same problem, except I added a 1, so it says 15.3 plus 4.81. So I am going to focus on the decimals, and I see again with 15.3, right here's the 15, it's in front of the decimal point. So when I put it into my chart, I'm going to put 15 in front of the decimal point. It's right over here, right? And then I'm going to put the remainder, the 3, right after the decimal point. So there's 15.3, but if you look carefully, it's not really 0.3. It's 15 in front, and behind is 3, and it goes to the tenths place. So we would actually read that as 15, and 3/10. Then we're going to put the second number, so it said 15 and 3/10 plus 4.81. So the 4 is in front. So I'm going to put a 4, but I can't put the 4 here underneath the 1 because the 4 is right next to the decimal point. I have to actually put the 4 underneath the 5. 4 point and then 81 right after the decimal point. So that's 81, and if we look up, that's the hundredths. So the way we read this entire last number is 4 and 81 hundredths. All right, great. Now we are ready to actually add these numbers together. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We'll put a plus. Make my big thick line, and we'll add. So the very first thing I notice is that this space here is empty. This is a spot for a trailing zero. I can add zeros all the way to the right after a decimal point to help with adding and subtracting. So now if we look vertically, this says 0 plus 1. That's pretty easy. That's 1. And then working our way across, then it's 3 plus 8. That's 11. So I'm going to put down a 1 and then put the 1 from 10. Remember, that's 11, right? So I'm going to add the 11. So this 1 goes right over there. And I'll get rid of it down here. Right, then I'll add my next column, 5, 4, and 1. 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 1 is 10. So I'll put down 10 here, right? But remember, we can just keep the right digit, so then I'll move the next one up on top. So now we have 1 plus 1 is 2, and then I'll move over my yellow so you can see that again. 1 plus 1 is 2. So it looks like the answer to this problem is 20 and 11 hundredths. Cool. So that is adding decimals. So what about subtracting decimals? Well, it starts the exact same way. So we're going to put the first decimal, 7, and then 28 behind. So that's 7 and 28 hundredths. This time we're going to take away or subtract 4 and 36. And then going up again is the hundredths place. All right, so we're going to subtract. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. Write my minus, and write my big long equals line. So we'll subtract vertically, starting with the top. 8 take away 6 is 2. And then we get into a little bit of a tricky spot as we move to the left. Remember that you have to start on top, so you can't turn this around and make it 3 take away 2. So we are going to regroup from the ones place. I'm going to cross out the 7. So I'm going to take away 1 from 7, and I'm going to get 6. And then as I move to the right, it's like adding 10 to the place value to the right. So instead of 2, I'm going to cross it out. 2 plus 10 is 12. So I'll write a mini 12 here. 12, and then I'll zoom back out. All right, 12 take away 3, I know is 9. And then working away to the left. All right, be careful. That's 6 take away 4, and that is 2. That means the answer to this problem is 2 and 92 hundredths. Okay, so what next? Let's look at our key ideas. Use the decimal point to line up the numbers, right? The decimal point always stacks. And thing number 2, if needed, put trailing zeros at the right end of the decimal. Remember, we did that when we added and when we subtracted.